I made it. We made it to Sprouts. It was kind of hairy. There were trees blown down. I mean, big trees with hundreds of years old, with roots and everything else blown down. But so far, we didn't have to detour too many times to get here. It's really going to get windy. I mean, gusts of 60 miles an hour and things like that are forecast. But I'm sure all of us couldn't complain about the weather. And I didn't know what exactly I was going to do today, except I knew that I was going to do something. And at the last parking lot, I turned on my little radio on my computer, because my car radio, of course, doesn't work. Neither does the heater or the air conditioner, or I'm just glad the lights work. But anyway, and there was the aria from the Queen of the Night's aria from the Mozart's Magic Flute. Now, I know I've shared this story with you before, but my dear friend, our still dear friend and daughter, Carrie Tilley. At the time, Carrie Tilley is a famous now anyway. She's a famous cookbook or a food editor and food book authoress. And our dear friend, she lives over kind of Half Moon Bay area now. And but anyway, at the time, she was the catering director at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion of the Los Angeles Music Center. And so she was responsible for the catering events for operas and concerts and things like that. It was a very, very responsible position. And the Placido Domingo had taken over the directorship of the Los Angeles Opera, and I believe on his premiere offering as director of the LA Opera, they did the Magic Flute. And because she rode up the elevator every day with Placido Domingo, and she arranged for me to do the opening lecture. Many performances have like an educational lecture before the opera itself, and she was going to cater that event at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion on the night of the opening night, and so I got to speak, on Mozart, magic, and masonry. And it was just like most every other wonderful thing that's happened in my life. It was like an accident that I got to do it. But anyway, it was a wonderful, wonderful night and a wonderful, wonderful performance. And and we just love the Magic Flute. And so here is at least an excerpt, and I've read it before over the last two or 3 years, I guess. And but I'm going to read it again for you, because in the blinding rain this morning, I grabbed the very book that had it in it. And it's from Allow Me to Introduce. And that's exactly what I did. I introduced the pre-performance address to the 2002. We're now going on 21 years. The 2002 opening night performance of the Los Angeles Opera. and it was held at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion at the Los Angeles Music Center. March 24th, 2002, if you're interested. Now, the note says here, spoken in Lon's best movie trailer voice. In a world where your mother is a homicidal moon goddess and your father is a sun-worshipping cult leader, your only protection just may be a very confused with a flute and a guy dressed up like a bird with a glockenspiel. And actually that got a few titters from the crowd. Okay. I'm Lon DuQuette, and I'm very proud to say I'm a Mason. My father was a Mason, my brother is a Mason. Many of the men whose lives and works have inspired, enlightened, and encouraged me throughout my life have been Masons. Masonry is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, secular fraternities in the world. It traces its modern origin to 1717, when a Grand Lodge was formed from several existing lodges in London. Now, just how long those lodges had been in existence prior to 1717 is unclear. There are some 130 versions of Masonic documents known as the Old Charges that date from around 1390. But Masonic tradition would have us trace its origins back much farther, back to the medieval cathedral builders, trade unions, back to the Dionysian artificers who built the great civic monuments of the Roman Empire, back to the builders of King Solomon's temple, even to the craftsmen who built the great pyramids of Egypt. Of course, there's no real evidence to support the existence of a prehistoric international brotherhood of pyramid builders, Local 327. But even if none of the traditional histories of the craft can stand the scrutiny of historians, it's clear that Masonry, as an initiatory society, is an incarnation, if not the heir to, the great mystery schools of antiquity, especially those that flourished in and around the Mediterranean basin. The Eleusinians, the rites of Mendes, of Osiris, Isis, Dionysus, Serapis, Mithras, and the Persian Magi, from whom we get the word magic. The mystery schools taught that ultimately the true essence of each man and woman is divine. In fact, if ever we could come to the full realization of our true natures, we'd discover that we are one and the same with the supreme consciousness and life force of the universe. Among the various mystery rites, the name and symbolic character of the deity chosen to represent this supreme consciousness varied considerably. But they all had one very important thing in common. They all surmised that it is possible to raise oneself to supreme realization. And they attempted to assist this evolutionary process by degrees, by means of a step-by-step program of purification and instruction, and by literally mutating the candidate's character by putting him or her through a series of dramatic and artfully choreographed ordeals. Now, I hope I'm still broadcasting here because I just saw my screen flicker there, so I hope I'm still on, everyone. In the early years of the Christian era, Alexandria, Egypt, was a center of intellectual, philosophical, and initiatory world. The universal order and stability of the Roman Empire brought the world together as never before. for a brief and brilliant moment in time. Knowledge and wisdom gleaned from scores of cultures, from China and India to Egypt, Israel, Europe, and Britain. They all synthesized within 3 great libraries. Here the holy wisdom of the Hebrew Kabbalah met the celestial sciences of the Chaldean astronomers and the occult wisdom of the Egyptian priests of Isis. Here the subtleties of Taoist and Buddhist philosophies touched the mathematical sciences and pragmatic politics of the Greeks. A catastrophic fire destroyed much of at least one of Alexandria's great libraries. And the growth and often violent zeal of the young Christian movement, for all intents and purposes, put an end to the overt activities of the mystery schools. Excuse me. Carl Sagan speculated that had the wealth of information stored in Alexandria not been destroyed, the level of technology that placed the man on the moon in the 20th century would have been reached in the 1500s. Be that as it may, we know that there survived throughout the suffocating centuries of the Dark Ages a body of men who, because of their unique knowledge and skills, formed a distinct class of world citizen. Men who could move freely from town to town, city to city, kingdom to kingdom, unrestricted by the limits of feudal servitude. Masters of geometry and construction, who could make stone rise to heaven. Master artists, who could enshrine the symbolic and mathematical secrets of creation within the very dimensions and ornaments of buildings that would stand for 1,000 years. These were free Masons, men who, by virtue of their own talents, wit, and experience, had freed themselves from the tyranny of kings and the oppression of the church. The free Mason was the archetype for the modern, liberated human being. Freemasons were quite literally the coolest guys in the Western world. When the great cathedral projects ended, the fraternity evolved from being one that applied its mystical principles upon stone to one that does so upon the hearts of human beings. By 1784, when Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart became a Mason, the progressive Masonic ideals of love, tolerance, enlightenment, and universal brotherhood were poised to set Europe and America on fire with revolution. Late in 1790, Mozart learned that Masonry would soon be outlawed in Austria. He conspired with a brother Mason, librettist and theater owner Emanuel Schikaneder, to enshrine the essence of Masonic ideals within a light-hearted and seemingly innocuous opera. That opera, of course, is the Magic Flute. And like all of Mozart's creations, it's constructed on many levels. The first level is purely musical. By this point in Mozart's career, he was famous for creating melodies that were not only beautiful to the ear, but memorable to the mind. Mozart wrote music you could hum and whistle. His musical logic was so clean and natural that the listener's ear anticipates each upcoming phrase, as if the music is gushing spontaneously from our own minds. Mozart's audience frequently became so instantly infected by these almost déjà vu melodies that they joined in with the principals on the second or and subsequent refrains. The music of the magic flute is delightful, and I'm sure there was no doubt in Mozart's mind that once it was heard, it would be impossible to erase it from the musical consciousness of the world. The next level was that of contemporary comment. Several of the characters in the magic flute were quite recognizable caricatures of some of the most important and powerful people of the day. The darkly passionate and vengeful Queen of the Night was a perfect image of Empress Maria Theresa, whose opposition to the ideals of the Enlightenment and hatred for Masonry was well known. Our hero, Tamino, was clearly based upon the Emperor Joseph II, son of Maria Theresa, who was not only a driving force of the Enlightenment, but also an early activist for equality between the classes and the sexes. Tamino's efforts early in the opera to please the Queen of the Night is a touching comment on the efforts of a royal son who in his youth naturally made efforts to please his imperious mother. And Sarastro, the wise and noble Hierophant of the temple of Isis und Osiris, could only have been Vienna's most revered Grand Master of Masons, Ignaz von Born. Von Born was the most idealized example of the enlightened humanitarian, scientist, and teacher. The next level is more esoteric and Masonic, and here we have to ask, does the magic flute actually reveal Masonic secrets? Technically, no. Masonic secrets concern themselves primarily with the claptrap of the fraternity, signs of recognition, the handshakes, the passwords, and of course the details of the dramatic ceremonies of initiation. There are very few aspects of the magic flute that would worry any Mason who actually knows what is and what is not secret in the craft. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, also a Freemason, said, "It's enough that the crowd would find pleasure in seeing the spectacle. At the same time, its high significance will not escape the initiates." In the time we have left before we enjoy tonight's performance, I would like to highlight just a few of the elements of high significance that do not escape the initiates. Let's begin by observing Mozart's use of the number 3. The number 3 is, for a number of reasons, a highly significant number to Masons. The overture of the magic flute exploits a quite dramatic three chords sounded in batteries of 3. These same 3 chords are sounded in the temple scenes. As we'll soon see, there are 3 temples, 3 doors, 3 attendants to the Queen of the Night, 3 guiding angels, and 3 rounds of voting. Brother Mozart even wrote the magic flute in E flat, a key that contains 3 flats in the key signature. While these are interesting tidbits, they're hardly veil-rending expositions of Masonic secrets. In the temple scenes, however, we see the suggestions of many elements of secret Masonic procedure, from the way the Brotherhood admits the candidate and votes upon his admission, to the various tests of fidelity, silence, and secrecy, most especially the ordeal of initiation itself. Peeling back yet another layer of esoteric secrets, we discover that brothers Mozart and Schikaneder incorporated key elements of the Hebrew Kabbalah within the characters and plot of their opera. We must remember that mystical sciences such as the Kabbalah, alchemy, and ceremonial magic were subjects of intense fascination to many Masons of the 18th century. And it's not at all surprising that these two masons with a mission would want to load their masterpiece with the biggest mystical punch they could. A fundamental concept of the Kabbalah divides creation and the human soul into 4 levels. These 4 levels correspond to the 4 letters of the great name of God, which in Hebrew is spelled Yod-He-Vav-He. Most of the non-Jewish world would pronounce this Jehovah. The dynamics that exist between and among all things represented by these 4 sacred letters is the focus of Kabbalistic study and meditation. But if we were simply to personify Yod-He-Vav-He as a family, they would have the characteristics of a father, mother, son, and daughter. And if we thought of them as royalty, they would be a king, queen, prince, and princess. The Kabbalistic scenario goes something like this. If each of us really knew our true spiritual identity, we would realize that we were like a king who is the most awake being of all. But for some reason, we've chosen to fall asleep. The king has fallen asleep and is dreaming he is the queen of the universe, who has fallen asleep and is dreaming she is the prince of the universe, who has fallen asleep and is dreaming he is a sleeping princess. Unenlightened humanity is just like Sleeping Beauty. We're dead to the greater reality and have completely forgotten our divine birthright. We are asleep to our true spiritual nature and are dreaming that we are trapped in a tomb of matter and time and space. This is just the position Princess Tamina finds herself during the first act of the magic flute. There is a part of us, however, who is not so deeply asleep, a part of us that remembers there is something more. This more awake self is our own Prince Charming. If only he could kiss our sleeping beauty and break the spell of illusion, then the princess could marry the prince and become the even more awake queen. And by doing so, the prince will automatically be elevated to become the most awake king. This great secret is the Kabbalistic soap opera. It is, of course, the Zen-like revelation that each of us has been the most awake king all along. I know this sounds hopelessly mystical and abstract, because it is hopelessly mystical and abstract. It's also the hidden scaffolding that supports and sustains the Western spiritual tradition, and, as such, is naturally the plot and the subplot of the magic flute. We have King Sarastro, the Queen of the Night, Prince Tamino, and Princess Pamina. And on a lower level, we have Papageno and Papagena, who in their own more mundane universal play, Prince and Princess, to Tamino and Pamina. In old movies, it'd be the first man and first lady, or first woman. And it's usually, the first man is always usually played by Edward Everett Horton. And, I forget the name of Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers' first woman. Oh, anyway. The most esoteric statement made by the magic flute, however, was one that shocked even free-thinking Masons of Vienna, and proves Mozart to be a revolutionary even within a revolutionary society, and a visionary mystic among mystics. Despite several charming, and by modern standards incredibly incorrect ditties about the nature of women in the earlier scenes, the opera climaxes with the dual initiation of Tamino and Pamina, a surprise ending that was very unsettling to many in the all-male Masonic fraternity. To initiates, this is more than just a social commitment or comment upon the equality of the sexes. It is a bold and visionary statement that touches upon the very dynamics of humanity's evolving consciousness. At the beginning of the opera, we meet the awesome and beautiful Queen of the Night enthroned upon the moon. She represents a time in humanity when woman was the supreme mystery, an innocent but primitive age when life appeared to spring directly from woman and was linked to the cycles of the moon. This was the time of the greatness and matriarchal social and religious institutions. As human consciousness evolved, we began to recognize how important the sun was to life on Earth and the importance of man's contribution to the procreative process. The pendulum swung violently in the opposite direction. Patriarchies supplanted matriarchies, and the great goddess was overthrown and ruthlessly subjugated by male gods. This is the source of the vengeful hatred that the lunar queen of the night feels for Sarastro and his sun-worshipping cult. Mozart envisioned the next step in human consciousness, when equality and balance between the sexes is achieved, when moon and sun are no longer at war but united to bring a new light to the world. Initiation means a beginning, and Pamina and Tamino's initiation at the end of the magic flute represents Mozart's sweetest hope that a new and wonderful age was at hand, an age in which the Masonic ideals of brotherly love, relief, and truth would manifest in the hearts of all humanity. This is a lyric here from the Magic Flute. An age when, as the three guiding angels sing, all doubts will disappear, when only the wise will rule. O heavenly peace, return to us and fill the hearts of all. Then the earth will a heaven seem, and mortals will have godly esteem. Well, it's almost time for the opera to begin. We're very lucky people. A wonderful and delightful and magical initiation awaits for us just inside the great doors of the Temple of Music. An initiation we can experience simply by seeing, hearing, and enjoying. The ritual team is almost ready. Grand Master Placido Domingo has consecrated the temple. Maestro Foster and Sir Peter Hall will serve tonight as junior and senior wardens, and our worshipful master in the East will be none other than the immortal spirit of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening. Now, I know that was a little long, but anyway, I just felt that we needed to be a little inspired with Mozart this morning. Anyway, where am I? Anyway, I guess I turned it around. Here I am. Hi. Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. There's a break in the rain. Hopefully it'll get home before it opens up again. But anyway, until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.